Usually when we talk about learning a new subject, like economics, there's this really heavy expectation of dry mathematical precision.
Right.
It reminds me of trying to learn a language by studying the past perfect subjunctive.
Oh, yeah.
You spend,
It was rough.
yeah, you spend months memorizing all these rigid rules on a chalkboard. But then you step off a plane in Madrid and you realize you can't even string together the words to order a cup of coffee.
Well, it is a completely detached way to understand how we actually experience the world. I mean, even native speakers barely understand the mechanics of the past perfect subjunctive.
No, of course not.
Think of sports announcers who say, if Beckham had scored, they wouldn't have lost. They're utilizing complex grammar in real time, but they certainly aren't pausing to diagram the sentence in their heads.
Right, they just know it.
Yeah, they just know how the rules apply to the field.
And that kind of perfectly brings us to our focus today, which is Robert H. Frank's concept of the economic naturalist. It effectively throws out the grammar book.
Entirely.
Yeah. We're looking at a landscape that is already right in front of our faces. So our mission for this deep dive is to decode the hidden rules governing our everyday lives, but using what the source material calls the Nepali method.
The Nepali method.
Yeah, we are learning the underlying language of the world through just simple, practical, everyday observation.
And what's fascinating here is that to be an economic naturalist, you really only need one foundational tool to start making sense of the chaos. And it comes down to the big picture, which is the cost-benefit principle.
The cost-benefit principle.
Right. It sounds like boardroom jargon, but it governs almost every decision made by humans and nature alike. Basically, an action is only taken if the extra benefit of taking it outweighs the extra cost.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Applying a corporate accounting rule to nature sounds a bit abstract, but the source material uses this evolutionary biology analogy that I think anchors it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at male elephant seals, they weigh 2,700 kilograms.
Which is massive.
They're literally the size of a mid-sized car.
Right.
But the females are tiny by comparison. Yet if you look at albatrosses, the males and the females are the exact same size.
Yeah.
And I initially assumed this was just sort of random genetic drift.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to that cost-benefit balance actively shaping biology. So elephant seals are a polygamous species.
Okay.
The males have to physically fight each other for control of harems that can include up to 100 females.
100 females, wow.
Yeah, so the benefit of being massive, of winning those incredibly violent fights, is absolute evolutionary victory. You pass on your genes.
Right.
But the cost is that being a 2,700 kilo blob of blubber makes it incredibly difficult to swim away from a great white shark.
Oh, sure, you're just a giant slow target.
Exactly. But that existential cost is outweighed by the reproductive benefit.
So applying that to the albatross, they are monogamous.
Right.
There's no harem to fight for, meaning the massive evolutionary benefit of being huge simply doesn't exist for them.
It does.
Nature refuses to pay the biological cost of making a male albatross the size of a car because there's just no return on that investment.
Exactly. The physical bodies of these animals are essentially living accounting ledgers.
That is such a wild way to think about it.
And that exact same mechanism governing the size of a seal dictates the shape and design of the products we interact with every single day.
Which brings us from the biology of animals to the physical anatomy of the things we buy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at how these economic pressures shape product design. So take drive-up ATMs.
Okay.
You pull up in your car, you roll down your window, and you punch in your panis.
No.
But there is Braille on the keypad of a drive-up ATM.
Right.
Blind people are not driving cars.
No, they aren't.
My first thought was that this must be some sort of blanket regulatory mandate, where a bank is just forced to slap Braille on every machine to avoid lawsuits.
It's a really common assumption, but the reality is deeply rooted in manufacturing economics, specifically the concept of fixed costs. Consider the manufacturing process for the keypad itself. It's significantly cheaper for the ATM manufacturer to design one single standard mold with Braille and just run it constantly.
Oh.
And they use that identical keypad for both walk-up and drive-up machines.
Oh, because running two separate production lines means two sets of tooling, two different inventory tracking systems, and double the warehouse management.
Precisely the issue.
Yeah.
The initial fixed cost of carving the Braille into the master mold happens just once. After that, the marginal cost of adding Braille to a drive-up ATM is effectively zero.
Wow.
The cost of maintaining two completely different keypad inventories across a global supply chain is astronomically high. So the manufacturer optimizes for their own production costs, not for the logical context of the driver.
Okay, I have another design quirk for you then. And I'm going to push back a little here because the math doesn't seem to add up.
Let's hear it.
Refrigerators have lights inside them. Freezers generally do not.
Right.
Now, I understand they are attached to the same machine, so the physical cost of a bulb and a switch is identical.
Yeah.
But freezers accumulate frost. They get packed with weirdly shaped, identical-looking frozen boxes.
Yeah, they do.
It is objectively much harder to see what you're looking for in a dark freezer than in a well-lit fridge. Shouldn't the benefit of a light actually be higher in the freezer?
That is a highly logical observation about the physical environment, but it misses the behavioral variable, which is frequency of use.
Frequency of use.
Right. You have to multiply that physical benefit by the number of times the consumer accesses the space.
Okay.
Think about a standard household. You might open the refrigerator door 20 or 30 times a day to browse for a snack or grab milk or get water.
Sure, yeah, all the time.
But you might open the freezer once a day or perhaps once every few days to pull out ice or a frozen meal.
So even if the light is more necessary in that dark, frosty environment, I'm only experiencing that necessity for about 30 seconds a week.
Exactly. The utility you get out of the fridge light is massive simply because of the volume of interactions. For the freezer, the cost of installing the hardware remains the same, but the cumulative benefit to the consumer is so minuscule that manufacturers determine buyers aren't willing to pay a higher retail price for the appliance just to get that light.
That makes total sense.
Though the source text does point out a fascinating exception that proves this entire rule.
Oh, the luxury market. The $12,000 Sub-Zero Pro 48 fridge.
Right. When a manufacturer is targeting a consumer willing to spend $12,000 on an appliance, they're dealing with a demographic whose disposable income drastically alters the cost-benefit equation.
Right, for that specific buyer, the cost of the light is basically irrelevant.
Yeah, irrelevant, and they demand every incremental bit of utility. So the Sub-Zero gets a freezer light.
That makes the underlying mechanism so clear. We are talking about the utility of physical space.
Right.
And that translates perfectly into another grocery store mystery, which is the packaging of milk versus soda. Milk comes in rectangular cartons. Soda comes in round aluminum cans. Now, thinking about the physical shelf space, round cans are incredibly inefficient. It is like packing basketballs into a square moving box. You are left with all these empty, useless gaps in the corners.
Right.
Why wouldn't a beverage company just make soda cans square to maximize shipping and shelving efficiency?
Well, the primary barrier is physics. Soda is a carbonated liquid constantly exerting outward pressure.
Thank you, sure.
A cylindrical container distributes that gas pressure evenly across its surface. If you pressurized a square container, the flat sides would bulge outward at their weakest points.
Oh, that makes sense. It would just turn into a weird balloon.
Yeah, exactly. But beyond physics, there is a secondary, purely economic reason tied directly to the value of the real estate those products occupy.
Refrigerated shelf space.
Yes, refrigeration is incredibly expensive infrastructure. Building those shelves, powering the compressors, maintaining the temperature, all of that makes that specific real estate the most premium space in the entire grocery store. Because the operating cost of that space is astronomical, the massive space-saving benefit of a tightly packed rectangular milk carton easily justifies the design.
And soda is usually just stacked on ambient temperature shelving in the middle of aisle 4. The store's cost to maintain that dry shelf is so low that the wasted space between the round cans doesn't eat into the profit margin enough to warrant redesigning the entire global aluminum canning process.
Furthermore, the design of that aluminum can is heavily influenced by human psychology. The text notes that if manufacturers made soda cans short and wide rather than tall and skinny, they would save roughly 30% on raw aluminum costs for the exact same volume of liquid.
30%.
Yeah.
That is a staggering cost reduction for a global supply chain. It's almost negligent not to do it.
It would be, except for a vertical optical illusion ingrained in the human brain.
Okay.
We inherently perceive tall, thin objects as holding more volume than short, wide objects, even when we can logically read the fluid ounces right there on the label.
Well, really?
Yeah, so if a beverage company tried to save 30% on aluminum by switching to a short, stout can, consumers would feel they were being cheated out of their drink and they'd switch brands.
So the cost of losing market share vastly outweighs the benefit of cheaper packaging.
Exactly.
So physical shelf space dictates the milk carton, and human perception dictates the soda can. But what about the physical habits of the people buying the products? Because there is this historical ghost haunting our closets.
The buttons.
Yes, women's shirts button on the left, but men's shirts button on the right.
It's an architectural standard that has stubbornly persisted for centuries despite violating modern ergonomics.
Right.
Roughly 90% of the global population is right-handed. From a purely functional standpoint, it is much easier for a right-handed person to button a shirt from the right side.
Yeah, the men's design makes sense.
The women's design is ergonomically backward for the vast majority of wearers.
And this all traces back to wealthy 17th century women. When buttons were first introduced, they were an incredibly expensive luxury item worn almost exclusively by the elite. Wealthy men generally dressed themselves, so their buttons were placed on the right for their own convenience.
Right.
Plus, men carried swords on their left hip, drawing them with their right hand.
Right.
Having a jacket buttoned left over right ensured the hilt of the sword wouldn't catch in the overlapping fabric during a duel.
But wealthy women of that era were almost entirely dressed by servants.
Okay.
The servants stood facing them. Since most of those servants were right-handed, it was significantly easier for the servant to manipulate the buttons if they were on the woman's left side.
Which is a fascinating historical footnote, but almost all women dress themselves today. Why wouldn't a modern clothing conglomerate just flip the buttons to the ergonomically correct side?
Because doing so would force millions of consumers to break centuries of ingrained subconscious habit. Imagine waking up tomorrow and every door handle in your house turns the opposite way.
Oh, that would be so annoying.
Right? It's a minor annoyance, but it creates friction. A manufacturer who suddenly flipped the buttons would annoy their customer base every single morning. In a competitive marketplace, no single brand wants to absorb the financial cost of retraining the consumer.
We are literally letting the muscle memory of 17th century maids dictate global manufacturing today because the cost of change is too annoying.
It comes down to the big picture of behavioral friction, yeah.
So we've established how these hidden costs shape the physical world. Let's pivot slightly from the physical design of the product to the invisible design of the price tag attached to it. This brings us to the core economic concept of leaving no cash on the table.
It is an immutable law of markets. If there is a clear opportunity for profit, competition will naturally arise and drive prices down toward the actual cost of production.
Right.
But as an economic naturalist, you immediately notice environments that seem to completely defy this logic.
Like the local bar. I walk into a pub and the bartender hands me a bowl of salted peanuts for free. From a production standpoint, peanuts have to be grown, harvested, roasted, salted, packaged, and shipped. They have a tangible, significant cost.
Yeah.
But if I ask for a glass of water, they charge me an exorbitant price for a bottle.
Right.
Water's practically free to source. I used to think this was just a logistical issue, like maybe the cost of purifying and bottling the water justified the markup.
The logistics of purification have very little to do with it. It comes down to how those items interact behaviorally with the bar's primary revenue driver, which is alcohol.
Oh.
In economics, these items are categorized as complements and substitutes. Peanuts and alcohol are complements.
Right, because eating salted peanuts triggers a biological response. It makes you thirsty.
Exactly, and that thirst directly increases your demand for high-margin alcohol. The bar gladly absorbs the cost of the peanuts because it's an investment that yields a high return in drink sales.
And the water is a substitute.
Exactly the opposite dynamic. If you sit at a table drinking water, your thirst is quenched. Biologically, you no longer desire the alcohol.
So you're occupying physical space in the venue without generating high revenue.
Precisely. The bar prices the water astronomically high to either offset the loss of the alcoholic drink you weren't buying, or to actively discourage you from choosing the water in the first place. The pricing strategy maximizes the total profit of the visit, not the margin on the individual item.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more because here's where it gets really interesting. You see this exact same strategy masking the massive infrastructure of the tech world. I was looking at cell phone plans recently. I can walk into a retail store and walk out with a highly sophisticated mini computer of a cell phone for $12.95. Sometimes if I sign a 2-year contract, they hand me this incredible piece of hardware for absolutely nothing.
Right.
But if I accidentally drop that phone a year later and need to buy a spare replacement battery, that little square of lithium costs $19.99. How is a single component more expensive than the entire machine?
This illustrates the crucial difference between fixed costs and marginal costs in the telecom industry. When you look at a wireless provider, their massive financial burden is not manufacturing handsets.
Okay.
Their burden is building cell towers, laying thousands of miles of fiber optic network, and leasing radio frequencies from the government.
Right, those are huge, multi-billion fixed costs.
Yes. But once that network is operational, the marginal cost to add you as a new digital signal on their tower is effectively zero.
Wow, so I'm just a tiny digital blip in their massive infrastructure. My data usage costs them fractions of a penny.
Yet that digital blip is contractually obligated to pay them hundreds a year in subscription fees. The provider is desperate to acquire you as a subscriber to pay down their fixed tower costs. The physical cell phone is just bait.
The bait? Yeah.
They gladly take a massive financial loss on the hardware to lock in your monthly recurring revenue. However, the replacement battery is a completely separate transaction.
Because buying a battery doesn't extend my subscription. It doesn't generate new monthly revenue. It's just a battery. So they apply a standard massive retail markup to it. The phone is the hook, and the battery is just an accessory.
This highlights how businesses manipulate prices based on their ultimate goal. But sometimes pricing anomalies aren't about the business's strategy, they're entirely about the consumer's demographic. The source material examines the resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt.
Yes. The hotel pricing there completely breaks the standard supply and demand graph we all learned in school.
It does.
In Sharm el-Sheikh, hotel occupancy hits its absolute peak in the summer. Demand is through the roof. Yet summer room rates are significantly cheaper than winter room rates. The standard economic model dictates that when demand goes up, prices should surge.
Right, but it forces us to refine our understanding of demand. A high volume of people wanting a room is only half the equation. The other half is that specific demographic's willingness and ability to pay.
Right, so if we look at the winter demographic in Sharm el-Sheikh, it is predominantly wealthy Northern Europeans fleeing brutal, freezing winters. They have high disposable incomes and a desperate desire for sunshine.
And the hoteliers know they can extract top dollar from that specific desperation. But in the summer, the demographics completely flip.
Right, the Europeans stay home to enjoy their own mild summers.
Yeah. The tourists flooding the Egyptian resorts in July and August are primarily locals from across the Middle East taking advantage of school holidays.
Okay.
Statistically, their average household income is lower than the winter European tourists. Even though the hotels are packed to absolute capacity, the hoteliers must slash their rates.
Because if they attempted to charge winter prices, the summer demographic simply couldn't afford it, and the hotels would sit empty despite the high seasonal interest.
Exactly. The price tag isn't just about how many people are standing in the lobby, it's intricately tied to the macroeconomic reality of whose wallets are in that lobby.
Which naturally shifts our focus. We've spent this time looking at how we pay for things, but we are also the workers earning the wages to pay those prices.
Right.
How does this cost-benefit principle dictate the numbers on our paychecks?
We have to look at a concept called the compensating wage differential, which is a theory originally articulated by Adam Smith.
The compensating wage differential, okay.
In a perfectly balanced world, an hourly wage would solely reflect the technical skill required to perform the task. But jobs exist in the real world. They come with varying degrees of risk, physical toll, and environmental unpleasantness.
And the text uses the example of paving a driveway. Paving a driveway in Minneapolis, Minnesota costs roughly half as much in labor as it does to pave the exact same size driveway in Dallas, Texas. The physical exertion of pouring hot asphalt is identical.
The physical task is identical, but the environmental reality dictates the labor market. Dallas has a mild climate, allowing paving crews to work consistently year-round. They generate a reliable 12-month income stream.
But Minneapolis experiences brutal freezing winters. The ground freezes, making paving impossible for several months of the year.
Right. So if a Minneapolis paving company offered the same standard hourly rate as a Dallas company, their workers would literally be unable to pay rent during the winter.
Oh.
Therefore, the market must adjust. To attract any competent labor to the paving industry in Minnesota, the hourly wage during the brief summer months must be significantly higher.
So it's a built-in premium to compensate for the guaranteed seasonal unemployment.
Exactly.
It's essentially hazard pay for the weather.
Yeah.
And speaking of hazard pay, the source text offers this incredibly stark example regarding corporate executives.
Right.
At the time the book was published, the CEO of Altria, the parent company of Philip Morris, was earning an $18.13 million salary. And to be clear, we are strictly looking at the economic analysis provided in the text, separate from any ethical debate.
Of course.
The text argues that a significant portion of that massive compensation package is actually a differential for public humiliation.
Yeah, the Economic Naturalist views reputation as a tangible asset.
Okay.
The text references the highly publicized 1994 congressional hearings where tobacco executives were required to testify under oath that they believed nicotine was not addictive, contrary to overwhelming scientific consensus.
Wow.
From a purely labor market perspective, enduring that level of global public shaming and reputational damage is a deeply undesirable working condition. Just as a deep-sea welder requires a premium for physical danger, this executive requires a massive financial premium to endure severe social and reputational costs.
That is wild. The market literally found the clearing price for enduring public humiliation, and it was $18 million. That is a heavy application of the principle.
It really is.
But let's look at a more common workplace dynamic. Waiters versus assistant chefs at high-end restaurants.
This is a great example.
The assistant chefs typically have formal culinary degrees, massive student debt, and highly specialized technical skills. Yet the waiters out front often walk home with hundreds of dollars in tips every single night, significantly out-earning the kitchen staff.
It appears unbalanced until you factor in career trajectories. The assistant chef is accepting a lower immediate financial wage because they're receiving alternative forms of compensation like intense technical training mentorship from a master chef and vital resume building.
Right.
They endure the lower pay as an investment toward eventually securing a highly lucrative executive chef position.
So it's a stepping stone, much like taking a low-paying internship at a prestigious law firm.
Exactly. But waiting tables is what economists classify as a terminal position.
A terminal position.
Yeah, there is generally very little upward mobility. You do not get promoted to restaurant CEO simply because you were an exceptional waiter. Because the job offers zero future career capital, the immediate financial compensation must be high enough to attract and retain reliable talent today.
Okay, let's unpack one more labor mystery. And it's a behavioral anomaly that anyone who has lived in the city has experienced. Taxi drivers in the rain.
Oh yeah, this one is fascinating.
When it starts pouring rain, it becomes entirely impossible to find a cab. Logic dictates that drivers would work extended hours during a storm because demand is surging, their cabs are constantly full, and they can make a fortune.
Right.
But the data shows they actually end their shifts early.
It completely defies pure economic optimization. But it perfectly illustrates that human beings are not perfectly rational calculating machines. Studies show that many drivers operate based on a rigid psychological target.
Like a quota.
Yes, say earning $100 a day. On a pleasant, sunny Tuesday, fares are sparse. They might have to grind through traffic for 10 long hours to hit that target.
But when the rain hits, the fares are nonstop.
Exactly. They hit their $100 psychological target in just 5 hours. And instead of recognizing the surge and capitalizing on it, they satisfy their mental quota and go home.
But the opportunity cost is massive. It's like sitting at a blackjack table, hitting an incredible winning streak, and walking away after 2 hands just because you made your bus fare.
Yeah.
A rational driver would work a 12-hour shift in the pouring rain, maximize their earnings, and then take the next sunny day entirely off to go to the park.
Economically, that is exactly what they should do to maximize income while minimizing labor hours. But the psychological comfort of hitting a simple, daily, predictable goal easily overrides complex, long-term economic optimization.
So what does this all mean? If everyday people, like the taxi drivers, are prone to these irrational psychological comforts, do corporations actively exploit that?
Unquestionably. Businesses rely on our behavioral quirks when designing their pricing structures. And this brings us to a crucial strategy known as the hurdle method of pricing.
The hurdle okay, let's frame this with entertainment. Why is it that the biggest blockbuster movie of the summer, a film breaking box office records, never gets a ticket discount? But a smash hit CD or a best-selling book is instantly discounted by 30% and stacked right at the front entrance of the bookstore.
Right.
Meanwhile, an obscure album by an indie band is sitting in the back corner at full retail price.
Well, the movie theater is constrained by physical capacity. A theater has a hard limit on seats. If a blockbuster is highly anticipated, every single seat will sell out at the maximum ticket price.
Sure.
If the theater manager would offer a discount, they wouldn't gain any extra volume. The room is already physically full. They would only be cannibalizing their own revenue.
But a bookstore's inventory doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. A bookstore has virtually unlimited physical access to a hit book or CD. They heavily discount the bestseller because it acts as a magnet. The goal is to draw massive foot traffic into the store.
Right.
They know that once a customer walks through the doors to buy the discounted hit, They are highly likely to also purchase a full-price coffee, a magazine, or another item on impulse.
And the obscure indie CD remains at full price because it doesn't generate foot traffic. It just sits on the shelf for 6 months. The store has to charge a premium to cover the real estate cost of storing it, plus the cost of hiring knowledgeable staff who can actually recommend it to a niche buyer.
Which perfectly sets up the hurdle.
Yeah.
Corporations face a fundamental dilemma. They want to charge wealthy customers high prices to maximize margin, and they want to charge price-sensitive customers low prices to maximize volume.
Right, but they cannot legally or practically interrogate you about your salary at the cash register.
Exactly. So they create a behavioral hurdle.
Like the classic hotel room scenario.
Yes. Imagine a standard hotel room priced at £100 a night. The hotel might place a small, inconspicuous placard on the reception desk that reads, "Ask about our special promotional rates."
Oh, okay.
If a customer takes the time, effort, and mild social friction to inquire about the sign, if they jump over that minor hurdle, the clerk immediately offers the room for £75.
But the reality is a corporate traveler with an expense account or someone who is just exhausted from a flight won't bother asking. They just hand over their credit card and pay the full £100.
Only the price-sensitive customer will notice the sign and jump the hurdle. The hotel successfully segments its market and charges 2 different prices to 2 different demographics without ever having to ask a single invasive question. It is an elegant self-sorting mechanism.
Looking at all of this together, it's a complete paradigm shift. The world around us isn't just a collection of random coincidences. There is this incredibly deep, hidden economic logic dictating the shape of our milk cartons, the placement of the buttons on our shirts, the chaotic pricing of cell phone batteries, and the numbers on our paychecks. Learning to be an economic naturalist really is a shortcut to being deeply well-informed about the invisible forces designing our lives.
It recalibrates how you observe your own environment. And this raises an important question, something for you to think about long after this deep dive ends. If the hurdle method of pricing relies so heavily on us being too busy, too proud, or too embarrassed to simply ask for a better rate, how much is our own ego actually costing us over a lifetime?
Wow.
We routinely pay a premium just to avoid a slightly awkward 5-second social interaction with a hotel clerk. Think about that the next time you book a room or walk past an obscure full-price CD to buy a discounted hit. Are you acting like the rational albatross, or are you carrying around a 2,700 kilo weight of pride just hoping the market doesn't notice?